Hello and welcome to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. here on my Joel Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evenings. Thank you to those of you who provided support and encouragement via the links you'll find on the support page of my website. You'll see a link to that page in the video description. I am not sitting at the piano. I'm sitting at my desk, because the video you're going to watch today was actually taken a few weeks ago when I was up at Eastern Nazarene College at a concert in the evening of Thursday the 16th of February at the Cove Center for the Arts. And in that same room, there is a music appreciation class that happens earlier in the day. And part of the reason I was brought up there was to do a little guest lecture for that class. There are performance opportunities that are given to that class and performers who come to the class. And so it was my task to just share myself, my process, and let it go where it wanted to go. And to some extent where the students wanted it to go. And I thought it would be cool to share it with you, and I got permission to do that. So hope you enjoy this little romp through all kinds of musical things that came to mind at the time, primarily improvisation, a little bit of history of jazz and such. So thanks for watching, and here we go. Paraphrase what John just said. We'll see what happens. You might know before I do. Thanks for the privilege of being able to do this. It's nice to meet you all. If you have anything you want to ask or maybe even steer this within reason, go ahead. I'm pretty steerable. but I'll set something up to start and we'll see where it goes. Let's think back to maybe 120 years ago or so, roughly the turn of the last century in the culture. And there was something significantly different then than now in terms of how we interact with music. Music has always been an important part of every culture. But things really changed a little more than 100 years ago. And can anybody guess what I'm referring to? Like the modern era, or I'll give you a big hint. How do you consume music?
Whatever you want, wherever you want.
However you want, wherever you want. Or even just go back, let's say 50 years ago, when we didn't have streaming, but we had vinyl LPs and stuff like that. How do we consume music? Recordings. Think about a world before sound recordings. Forget about like all the other technology, because everything is just exploding. And John and I, people our age, are just watching this thing happen, the whole world turn upside down. But maybe sound recordings leading to the digital age is the same kind of cultural shock or earthquake that inventing the printing press was, a little more than 500 years ago. So think about if you had to experience music without any sound recordings, what would you do? What would be different? Well, one of the things that was different 120 years ago is pretty much every house had a piano. And in that house, somebody, at least one person, played the piano. Think about this. How do you measure the popularity of a recording today? You measure sales, million seller, gold, platinum, whatever, and talking about sound recordings. How did they measure that 120 years ago? Any guess? There was a way. There were million selling songs. Sheet music sales. A whole different animal. So let's set the stage around the turn of the previous century. Play a little music that would have come from sheet music. You'll probably recognize it. I can play.
way up.
Is that the entertainer?
That's the entertainer, Scott Joplin. Back in 1970, and I know none of us except two of us were born yet, but back in 1970, there was this movie that came out called The Sting. I don't know if anybody's seen it. But pianist at the time, Marvin Hamlish, recorded an all Scott Joplin ragtime track for that. And that's how a lot of people recognize ragtime music. Has anyone even heard this before? Okay, thank you. I feel a little better. So, if you've heard this before, I hesitate to ask this because right now I haven't gotten much out of you, but let's see what happens. Will anybody here admit to having taken piano lessons when they were younger? Okay, good, thank you for admitting that. Any of you who took lessons, could you have made an observation about what I played or how I played it? Anybody here played the entertainer on the piano? Okay, I may have to use John. John kind of knows what I want him to say. I'd rather you all say it, but we'll work on that. So, the thing about music that you buy, sheet music, it's like, well, I didn't bring Joplin, but I brought this pile of ink, right? And this is something that if you learn to play the piano traditionally, or you learn like classically, you learn how to pull notes off the page. So what happened with the entertainer was I sort of played it the way it was written until I didn't anymore. Right? And the idea of taking something that's meant to be played a certain way and then being willing to express or be free or improvise on it is the essence of what they call jazz. Let's talk about jazz for a minute. Does anybody follow jazz or consider themselves a jazz fan or like jazz or listen to jazz? Okay. Two and a third people. Okay. The two people I know. Right? Yeah. So let's just say this: improvised music. Because stylistically, it kind of goes all over the place. But back in that day, any popular song, people could see if I can think of a song that you all would know. You have to have watched Casablanca, or maybe you've had to watch Harry Met Sally. Maybe you have to listen to Louis Armstrong. And you just throw this away. No, throw it away. Put it aside and be in the moment. Right? Here's an example of what this experience is like for me. Let's say you're reading this book, or you're doing something you're really into, or you're doing some kind of project, and all of a sudden you lose track of time, and you're just in this other space, and you can feel, and me just talking about it, I can feel this happening to me. And then you like kind of come to like an hour and a half later, and you wonder where the time went, but the time was just all absorbed in that moment you were in. Have you ever had some kind of experience like that at some point?
Like when you're driving home and when you get home, you're like, how did I get here?
So, are you involved in the arts in some way?
Yeah.
Okay, makes total sense, you see. Because how we live our lives are just going to be consistent ultimately with what kind of person we are. And where you are now is in that time of discovery. But I'll level with you, you're never going to stop discovering. I'm 63 years old and I feel like I'm your age, you know, or even younger, the kid in the candy store. Just discovering. So what's your participation in the arts?
I do musical theater.
Ah, cool. So we have an actress here. Yeah. And that space that you're going to get in on stage, you want to be in that space, that same space where you get home and you say, how did I get here? So it's interesting to understand that when we give up control, like of driving our car. Now, I wouldn't recommend this just as an experiment. I'm just saying, if you give up control to driving your car because something took it from you, that something is actually better at whatever it is than we would be anyway, which is interesting to think about. So, like me improvising in front of you, if I can like not care that you're here, and I can not care about what I'm doing, and I can be in just this altered place, it's what I would call that is like missing your exit. You know, it's the same kind of thing. You ever drive down the road and then your exit's 10 miles big behind you because your head was someplace else and somehow you stayed on the road? Yeah. That's actually a really soul enlarging discipline to try to cultivate. I'll just leave that with you. It's like, is that something you can actually like practice toward or develop within yourself, that ability? I think so. Intuition. Does everybody have intuition? Yeah. Does everybody use it? No. Okay. Let me say this. Intuition is one of those things, one of the few things probably, that most everybody can agree on. And I think most people would agree that if your gut tells you something, if you overthink it and then like change your gut's mind later, you're going to wind up like saying, I wish I had followed my gut. We all experience that. So on a very basic level of what we might call faith, there's something that everyone agrees on, that if we can trust that, even if we don't know what it is, but if we can trust it, and we can say trusting ourselves, but you know, we can discuss that later, or maybe never discuss it. But trust your intuition. So let me do something partly what John was talking about. Somebody give me a basic little tune, something like a nursery rhyme, Christmas, some tune that I would know, we all would know. And let me just see what happens with it. Somebody not John. John's scheming when I say things like that. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I should have brought that to sheet music. Do you know Mozart wrote a set of theme and variations on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? So I think it was in German, the title was translated to I'm telling you, Mom, but it was... And then it starts out... says that you talked about Baroque and classical style periods. This would be very classical, very like, you know, get my white powder rig out and all that. But all that, remembering what the music did, man, that's too hard. Let's do theme and improvisation, not theme and variation. Somebody give me a key to start out in. I just automatically played it in C, but there's somebody who's a musician with those keys. Somebody give me a key.
G major.
G major. You're being easy on me, Wes. Good. on that one. Oh my goodness. All right. If you're not going to steer me someplace with questions or direction, I'll just keep going and let's see where it goes. So I opened this before, and this fell off. And question?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Why do you sit on books?
Okay. When you put a dolly underneath the piano, you actually raise it off the ground. And part of the idea of piano technique, and I've got some injury issues that make this more relevant to me, there's a certain height you want to be. Okay? Okay, those of you taking piano lessons, okay, thank you for giving me a little detour here. Those of you taking piano lessons, one of the first things you may have learned is like how you're supposed to hold your hands. And one of the things I'll tell you is like pick up what kind of a grapefruit or what some kind of like ball, and actually that's like the worst thing you can do because you like have this, you're starting with a death grip. And whenever you do anything with a lot of tension and you do it repeatedly, I mean, we all know now about repetitive use injury, right? With computers and all that. I was going to say typewriters. John and I have these differences. And so I actually got retrained in piano technique to use weight and momentum as opposed to using muscle movement. And one of the things you have to be able to do is just fall into the key. So all your momentum has to be here. And if I'm sitting too low and I'm doing this, that hurts. So for me, it's even more important to do that. So I try to sit at least a certain height. I could do this, but I don't want to. All right, let's go down this detour. The piano was invented in 1709. So before 1709, there was no such thing as a piano. They were organs, they were harpsichords, they were clavichords, no piano. Does anyone know why the piano was invented? What was the motive for? They were trying to accomplish something. They were trying to allow the musician to do something musically that couldn't be done on any of the other instruments. Anyone know?
Incorporate use of dynamics.
Yes, right. Or to simplify that, be able to play soft or loud or gradually get louder and softer, which you couldn't do. Like if you have a church organ, I don't even know how many churches have organs anymore. And I'm like the old school church organist, so it's like I'm watching all that go away. But if you hit a note on an organ in a church, a pipe organ, you're going to hear one level of sound. If you hit it louder, you're going to slower or harder, you're going to hear the same level of sound. All those old instruments just produce one volume. And the reason that the organs have multiple keyboards, or what we call manuals, is you can set them to be different volumes and have different sounds. So you can get louder and softer, but all at once. You know, terrace dynamics is what they call it. But if you're like a violinist or something, you can have this beautiful lyric, or you sing, you can have this expression, and you couldn't do it on a keyboard instrument. So, Bartolomeo Cristofori, Italian guy, they probably pronounce it all wrong. He got the idea that if you have a harpsichord, but you have felt hammers that you throw into strings, you can regulate how fast they fly the strings from here. And so what happened was he created, in essence, a percussion instrument, which wasn't his goal, but I get louder, I get softer. But now think about this, which makes my head spin when I actually think about it. Everything about the sound that you get out of a piano is a result of how you hit the key and how much control you have over the key. Did you know before the piano was invented, nobody or hardly anybody used their thumb when playing a keyboard instrument? You didn't have to. All you had to do was get your finger there. You could like slide from one key to the other. A church organist, if you take like lessons in classical organ, you learn how to like slide from one key to another, or like walk like a spider, which for me hurts. Things you can't do on the piano because every note is dependent on you being in control, striking it. So, if you ever took piano lessons, But you have to do it because, let me give you an example. Tell me which sounds better. Hopefully you're going to say the second one, right? Because using control that you get from your technique, you can make musical decisions like make sure the melody is loud enough to be heard. Make sure they cut the even softer. Make sure the melody is like sings like a singer. Am I playing this again? So the piano is, in some regards, the easiest instrument, and in some regards, the absolute hardest, because of the control issue. Another thing to think about is, I call piano a braille instrument, because these black keys, there's no like divine order that says you have to have black keys arranged this way. Why are the black keys even on the piano? Why are they all white keys? Think of it. I've never thought about it, but you can get there. What purpose do the black keys really serve? I gave you a giant hint. Oh, come on, somebody's awake.
To control it,
I call it a braille instrument, huh?
or to control how you play.
Well, yes, but no. Even more basic purpose. Okay, how would you know where the white keys, what the white keys are, if you didn't have the black keys on the piano? In other words, the black keys are arranged in 2 and 3 to organize the rest of the notes. So the first thing you learn on the piano is middle C is to the left of a group of 2 black keys. That's the only reason we have black keys on the piano. Because we don't want to put like stickers on it. We don't want to like have to think about it, right? So, and how many like blind piano players have we heard of? And not taking anything away from anyone like Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder or anybody like that. But any pianist who gets to a certain level needs to be able to play with their eyes closed, because you can just feel my way around. Same thing with the organ, those pedals in your feet, it's another keyboard, you feel the black keys. Alright, I'm not sure where that was going, but so let me open this again. So, you had talked about Baroque and classical period music so far. So Bach would be the quintessential Baroque composer. And here's a intermediate level, basic little Bach thing. So somebody tell me, what am I holding up in front of you? What is this?
Sheet music.
Okay, it's sheet music. Describe it in one word.
Note.
Flat. I like you. All right. And what is what's on this page?
Note.
Notes. Okay. So far, no one has said the word music other than sheet music. Take the sheet away. Because this isn't really music. You can't hear it. Or, like Earl Gardner said, no one can hear you read. Right? This is information. Right? And it's the goal of the musician to translate information into music. So let's talk about these 2 approaches. One, the improvising, the one about missing your exit and being in the moment and all that. And the other, I would call like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. So anyone who's taken piano lessons, you had a book, right? And you had to learn how to read middle C, you had to do all this. And possibly all you ever did was have music put in front of you and you figured out how to play it. Which, at a certain point, kind of makes you hostage to whoever wrote the music. Now, if it's a great classical composer, that's great. But let's say it's an arrangement of a pop song you like, right? And then you play it, but it doesn't sound so satisfying. Well, that's not because the song's bad. It's because that arrangement's not so good, and you're struggling. But anyway, here's an example of what a classical musician is. Have any of you played this? Okay, the two-part inventions are kind of like at a certain level that you get to if you've taken a lesson long enough and you do it. But I'll tell you, that gives me a headache. You know, all that thinking, you know, because you have to like just think about what you're doing. Let me play a real simple Bach piece, but let me not think about it. Okay, now those of you who are taking piano lessons, anyone to play that one? Okay, yeah, good. Okay, so here's my big problem. I can't play this. I'm so in awe of like musicians, classical pianists, who can like remember exactly what, I don't even know what I just did. So that's okay. I still got the idea, right? Yeah, I feel good about that. The other thing, I need some, you know, ibuprofen or something. So, those of you who are in the arts in some way, does anybody have a career ambition to maybe pursue that? You know, does anyone see themselves or want to be like a performing musician or an actor or a visual artist, anything like that? Or have you all like chosen to do normal practical things with your lives? Or we're not really there yet?
I'd like to devote like voluntary time, but like in terms of like a career, I don't feel like I'm strong enough in my art form to pursue it as like a career and like know that I'll be comfortable.
I applaud you for your realism. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard place to get to. It's really hard to be objective about yourself. And this is with anything, but with the arts in particular. A musician friend of mine calls this the hidden bummer factor. Think about it like this. If you're involved in the arts, or you're involved in something that uses your intuition, you're involved in something that shows you new spaces you haven't seen before. It's not like you know, math problems or reading history. This is a whole different thing, different part of our brain, right? What happens as you get better, the universe of it kind of opens up even more. And then you can know some things out there that weren't there before because you couldn't see them. Doesn't mean you can do them, because you're going to have to like practice half your life to get there, but you can see them. And as you get better and better, and everyone around you is like getting happier and happier at what you're doing, you're possibly feeling worse and worse about yourself, because you're now even more aware of what the possibilities are, and you see yourself as like increasingly small in it. So like having a sense of like self-appreciation and self-worth as an artist is a complicated thing. And what you're talking about is that like it's realistic, like I'm not good enough. But you know, somebody could also say they're not good enough and actually be fantastic because they're being so hard on themselves. Or someone's just being realistic and healthy with it. It's a complicated landscape. I don't know if anybody actually listened with any intent to the music that was being played when you came in. John happened to pick this pianist, Art Tatum, which I doubt. Has anyone ever heard of Art Tatum? I'll be really impressed. Right? So Art Tatum, he died in the 50s, and I don't even think was 40 years old. He was just one of these, musicians who tortured his body and in his case drank himself to death. But he was considered, even by classical musicians, the greatest pianist of the 20th century. And a rite of passage for every young jazz pianist, especially like back in the day when I came up, is you had to listen to an Art Tatum record, and the inevitable result is you quit playing. Period. Anyone ever hear of Oscar Peterson? That might be your name. Okay. Oscar Peterson, if you think you might be interested in jazz in a historic sense, I recommend looking up Oscar Peterson. Monster piano player, but lots of soul, great blues feel, and if you're interested in just real swinging music. So Oscar Peterson, top of his game, and the story is that his father figured he was getting a little too full of himself, so he bought him an Art Tatum record and made Oscar listen to it. And Oscar argued with him that it was two piano players on the record, that it was really only one. And then Oscar quit for a month. When I heard Art Tatum when I was 17, I happened to buy a recording that he made when he was 17. I quit for just a week. I got over it a little faster. But we all have these discussions or these relationships with our egos in whatever we do. And I'm trying to say something that applies broadly in whatever you do. Okay, I'm going to recommend a book. It's an easy read. It's called Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner. Kenny Werner is a jazz musician, but this isn't just about jazz. It's about your relationship with your sense of self-worth and what you do. In other words, some of the stuff I played for you, I was kind of happy with. Some of the stuff I played, I felt really sucked. Okay? But it doesn't matter. The more I think about it, the worse it gets. And I think you can understand that. So you have to let go, and you have to let it play through you and let that intuition happen. So anyway, how did I get to talking about that? I have no idea. Anybody want to steer me someplace else before I pick another lane? Let's pick another lane. Let's talk about stylistic evolution. So I'm going to hope somebody will answer, just to show John that you were taking in what he was saying. Can anybody give me a stylistic or some kind of description about Baroque, the Baroque era of music? Anything about Baroque music? Okay, ornamentation. Less to say to say. Anybody else? I don't know what John actually talked about, but or anything you took away from it by listening to it.
In comparison to the classical stuff, it was a lot more like between the two voices or multiple voices, it was a lot more complex than I guess I don't want to say like the classical period was simplistic by any means, but having more of a steady voice and having other pieces of other instruments and stuff supporting it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense at all.
That makes total sense. And you did the deep dive. We could fold what she said into one word: texture. Right? And the texture of the era of Bach is multiple melodies going at once. Right? What we call polyphony. The texture of the classical era and everything after that is more of something that sounds like accompaniment melody, right? It's interesting, like Mozart can be like and actually, how do we play a lot of pop tunes today? We get a chord in our left hand, we play a melody in our right? But this Bach thing goes all over the place. So here's just something to think about if you're at all interested in this. The evolution that John's teaching you about classical music actually starting with the Renaissance, when everything was sort of rediscovered and reorganized, and then the Baroque, the classical, the Romantic, the Impressionistic, and all the contemporary things. The thing is, it kept evolving. And this is the thing about any kind of human activity. It never stands still. It always evolves. And this is going to I hope this doesn't sound like a judgmental parent here. That I don't know if people like young like you today really appreciate how ridiculously fast now things are evolving, because it's like your normal, right? I'll tell you what my normal was. I write things down on paper. You know, I look at the paper, I put it down. When I was 17 years old, it's when they first came up with like calculators that could do like fancy stuff other than add just 1 and 1, right? And we were allowed to bring them to school as high school seniors. That was the first thing. But it was like this big, and I had to like jam it in my pocket. And, yeah. But now, I mean, does anybody even think about what I do with it? What goes into this thing in our pockets? You know, I have grandkids, and the grandkids are like just looking at their phones, and it's like, and it changes every 5 minutes. You know, in 1969, we put a man on the moon for the first time. I was 9 years old. I watched it on television in the department store when it was happening. And the computer that they used, I think, John, it like filled this room, right? And it was like infinitely less powerful than what we hold in our pockets now. It's ridiculous. So things evolve, nothing stays the same. So Baroque music, classical music, romantic music, start at ragtime and follow the line of jazz. The evolution is exactly the same, exactly the same. Anybody ever hear like the Dixieland jazz? Funny story about that song. I sort of gave it away. Years ago, I was a guest musician in the church on a Sunday morning, and the minister told me right before the service what he wanted me to play while people were receiving communion. And it was that. It was when the saints go marching in. And I didn't think it was a good idea, but he made me do it. I wonder if communion went any faster than if you can picture in your mind a Dixieland band. By the way, that's actually a politically incorrect word now. We're not supposed to say Dixieland jazz. We're supposed to say traditional jazz. But you've heard of the word Dixieland jazz, right? Okay. Can anybody tell me any of the 3 instruments, the three wind instruments that stand in front of a Dixieland band? I know Wesley can name at least one of them, but you come later. Can anybody name any of the 3 wind instruments that stand in front of a Dixieland band?
I want to say flute.
Not a flute.
I'll guess with the saxophone.
And actually, not a saxophone. What would be the alternative? What would be like another instrument a saxophone player could play?
Oh, never mind. Differently.
Reed. Okay, clarinet, right? Clarinet, and then I heard trumpet and trombone. So you have those 3 instruments, and they're all improvising at the same time. So if you listen to just like an old Dixieland record, it's interesting because you have this what they call polyphony. You have this multiple voice thing. You have this, what she was talking about what distinguishes Baroque music. And so it's interesting that as jazz started out, it started out being like Bach. It became more like Mozart. It became like chords and melodies. And then it became more like Beethoven or Debussy. It got more expressive. It got more harmonically rich. So, if you're interested in it, look up like Dixieland jazz, big band jazz, swing era jazz, fusion jazz, which you would probably appreciate. Anyway, all of that. All of that. I think I'm just going to play something. Let's see what happens. surprised when the years of joy and man's desiring showed up? It's because I was. But that's like that would be an example of illustrating or showing you being in the moment and just allowing whatever to happen. All right. Then let me go one more place. Let me go with the ridiculous idea of being in the arts to make one's living. Does anyone know anybody, like a family member or friend who's like a professional musician or professional artist or an actor, and is somewhat succeeding at it, whatever that means?
Danielle Wade, if you're familiar with her, she's in Mean Girls on Broadway right now. She plays Katie Heron. She grew up in my hometown and went to high school.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Did you stay in touch with her?
I didn't really get a chance to know her on a personal level. Like we kind of just It was more like acquaintances, like friends through friends type thing. My one friend, she was definitely a lot closer with her. I just kind of like knew her through there, and she ended up getting really successful.
Cool. It's cool when we see somebody we know do something like that. And what does it mean to actually succeed in the arts? What I would say is that you can survive while doing it. Okay? Because here's a little story. A friend of mine years ago was working in one of the big bands, and sitting on a break, and one of the musicians came by and just said to him while he was walking, "Remember, kid, there is no big time." Why do we do this? Right? Because you've experienced this. You know, you're going to go someplace and you're going to trip over like a really good musician. You might be like at a wedding reception, you're hearing somebody like you really wail, or wherever. Great musicians are everywhere, and very few of them are famous. And in fact, I don't want to put it like this. Okay. The track to being famous may have nothing to do with how much art you're actually putting out. And so people who are involved in the arts don't do it for fame and fortune. We do it to make a contribution. You know? And John mentioned the music therapy thing, which is something that just I kind of veered into midlife. It's nothing I planned to do. But it came out of my understanding that the reason I play music is to connect with people. It's not about me. It's about it's about everybody, it's about all of us. And music therapy is about using music to help people, using music to connect with people. And the best thing for me as a musician is to know that I made a connection with you, or I made a connection with whomever. And because of my music therapy kind of detour, probably the most important and poignant experiences I'll ever have are in like hospice patients' rooms, or in environments where nobody gonna see me. So whatever we do, all right. Should I tell you this story? I'm gonna tell you this story. All right. And I'll give you the moral of the story first. Purify the motive, elevate the outcome. I've never told this story to college students, and you're going to tell me later if I should have or not. Okay. So when I was in college, I commuted to a state college. I lived at home. I did it part-time. It took me 8.5 years to graduate because I've been a full-time gigging musician ever since I was 17 and had a driver's license in New Jersey. And I didn't do it to get a credential for anything, although it did serve me later to help me get a music therapy certification, because I didn't see it as getting me anywhere. I just went because I woke up one morning and said I had this chance to go to college, I'm going to learn stuff. And it's like, I went for a year, dropped out because I wasn't ready, I didn't care. I gigged full-time for a couple of years, just played 6 nights a week. You know, my dad kept elbowing me about, going to school, because old school, older people didn't get to go to college, they wanted me to, I was the only kid. And then one morning I woke up, a couple of years after having dropped out, and just said, okay, I think I'm ready to learn, which basically means I'm willing to actually pay attention and study and do that stuff, right? And so I went back part-time. And then a few years later, I get this notification in my mailbox at school. Now, I was not involved in student life whatsoever, so I didn't even know what was going on. The department chair comes up to me and says, "Joe, you need to check your mailbox. People are really upset at you." But my first response was, "I have a mailbox." Mm-hmm. So I went to this mailbox, and there was this invitation to join this honor society. It's Pi Kappa Lambda, it's an honor society for music majors. And I'm like, what is this? Now, credit-wise, I was a junior by then. And the idea was if you're in the top 10% of GPA in your senior class, or top 5% as a junior, you get invited. And I'm thinking, okay, this must be a competition that everybody's having. And, you know, I spent all my life people having competitions with me, and I'm just being, you know, oblivious to it, because I'm just doing my thing. And it's like, and then I'm thinking, wait a minute, I blew off my freshman year, I got a D in one of my classes as a freshman. My GPA sucked, what's going on? How am I in the top 5% of my class? And then I realized, I'll get this, I realized I never looked at my grades. They sent the report card home at the end of every semester, right? I never even opened it, I never even looked. I was just doing my thing. I was just like soaking it up in school, playing my gigs at night, and it was, you know, it was manageable, it was cool. I said, wait a minute, I gotta find out what's going on. And I didn't even know where any of those report cards were. They're probably all in the trash, I didn't know. So I like walked into the music office, I wasn't supposed to do this, but I just went right to my file, you know, get out of my way. And I'm looking at this thing, and lo and behold, from the time I went back to school, when I had like got my head straightened out, I got a straight A's. I didn't even know. Okay? And all of a sudden, like my GPA is 3.85. It's like, darn, man, if I had an act together when I was a freshman, I could be like the valedictorian. And I started thinking about it. I had never thought about it before. Thinking is not a good thing. You know, the problem with humanity is this. You know, the rest of the animal kingdom is not messed up. It all works like it's supposed to, right? But we have just enough intelligence to think we can actually figure things out and understand things. And that's probably the worst thing about humanity. So I started thinking about it. It's like, man, I like this, but what? And you know, I got A's and B's the rest of the way out. I couldn't keep focused on it because of the great thing. And if you do something with the purest motive possible, and you put your self-interest aside, you're going to have a better outcome than if you do something for yourself. And that's just a general thing to think about. So, like in my world, it's being in a position to accompany Sandra, a lot of accompanying of singers and singer-songwriters, a lot of collaborative things. I have a producer going out with a wonderful vocalist. But it's all about living from here. So if there's one thing, and this is probably the last thing I get to say, right? If there's one thing I can encourage you to do, and it's something you'll ponder for a long time, and by ponder, I don't mean think about, I mean just let it sit here. How can I live from here? How can I do what I do, not just for myself? How can I do what I do, not just because I have a goal. Goals are good, but goals are just to point you to somewhere. You know, live life like you're walking through the woods. You know, and just experience what's there. Okay. Now I probably have just a couple of minutes left, and John probably wants to throw something at me.
Well, you want to do one of the, something I like, Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what John likes. He likes to mess with my head. I used to do this a lot in concerts, and I stopped doing it because it makes me think too much. But I guess that's part of the fun. So I'm going to solicit a few unrelated tunes, and I'm just going to let them happen kind of all at once and see what happens. I used to call this the ADD improvisation. It kind of is. But we're going to have to come up with tunes that we all know, and I'm not really, unless you like listen to older music, you know, I might not know the songs you listen to, so we're going to have to like agree. So give me like another nursery rhyme tune that's not Twinkle Twinkle. Let's start with that.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Okay. Give me like a simple Christmas song. You know, or a Christmas song that you don't mind whatever happens to it. So not something that you really care about now. Jingle bells. All right. Give me, let's see. A minute. Okay, a classic Broadway tune. You know, like because I'm sure you've all seen like people with their shows. That's the
Like, okay, what are we considering classic?
you know, something not a contemporary Broadway show, just because I won't know the music.
Okay.
You know, like Right, like a Sound of Music or like an Oklahoma or, you know, a show like that.
Like, would Chicago suffice? Chicago? No?
Okay. Give me the tune.
Like the Cell Block Tango? Something
Okay,
like
and
that?
that's not in my head, so.
No? Okay.
All I ask of you, which I know that tune. Enough. All right, and then I'll give John the wild card.
The wild card again?
Now, let's see, he's scheming here.
I didn't expect to get a choice.
Why don't you think about it for a minute? I'll give you the question.
So, we were talking about this tune earlier, so let's do Linus and Lucy.
That's what I was going to talk about. Okay, let me do that real quick. Thanks, John. All right. I'm going to assume that it's still the case. Everyone knows what that is, right? Because when I was coming up, it was on network TV all the time, and now it's all changing. All right. So here's just a little quick story. The pianist, Vince Guaraldi was his name. In 1963, he had an instrumental hit with a song called Cast Your Fate to the Wind. You may or may not have heard it. And the producer that was putting together the Charlie Brown Christmas special, which was in 1965, and it was the first animated Charlie Brown thing. It was a big deal. And he was in a cab in San Francisco, where Vince Guaraldi was from. And when Vince Guaraldi had a hit with that song, every radio station in San Francisco was playing it because it was like, hey, it's from San Francisco. And so Lee Mendelson hears it on the radio and says, that's the music I want for Charlie Brown. So the song Cast Your Fate to the Wind was like Vince Guaraldi's audition piece to get called by Lee Mendelson to later write and all the other stuff he wrote. Charlie Brown's theme, that's the music that's playing when he goes to the mailbox and says, rats, I already know that nobody likes me. Why do we have to have a holiday season to emphasize it? One line that says, gee, Charlie Brown, do they still make the wooden Christmas trees? Or Lucy says, try to catch snowflakes on your tongue, it's fun. And you tell him it's obsessed with the Charlie Brown Christmas. Right? But the point is that what you do, if you do it from here, that's what reaches people. Because people are communicated through here, not in their heads. So, everything's an audition all the time. Don't think of it that way. Just think of it like, be real. Okay, what am I doing? I'm doing Linus and Lucy.